Hello, God's Prayer Warriors. Brother Felix here. And I just wanted to do a quick reading of Genesis chapter 5 with you guys. This just breaks down Adam's descendants. So this will just be a short and quick reading of Genesis chapter 5, verses 1 through verse 32. And again, this breaks down Adam's descendants from Adam to Noah. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived about 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. And after he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. And after he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. And after he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. And after he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. And after he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. After Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. And after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah, and said, "He will comfort us in our labor and painful toil of our hands, caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So to break down just a couple of these verses, verse 1, this is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. The Bible contains several lists of ancestors called genealogies. There are two basic views concerning these lists. Number one, they are complete, recording the entire history of the family, tribe, or nation. Or number two, they are not intended to be exhaustive and may include only famous people or the heads of families. Became the father of could also mean was the ancestor of. Why are genealogies included in the Bible? The Hebrews passed on their beliefs through oral tradition. For many years in many places, writing was primitive or non existent. Stories were told to children who passed them on to their children. Genealogies gave a skeletal outline that helped people remember the stories. For centuries, these genealogies were added to and passed down from family to family. Even more important than preserving family tradition, genealogies were included to confirm the Bible's promise that the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ, would be born into the line of Abraham. Genealogies point out an interesting characteristic of God. People are important to him as individuals, not just as races or nations. Therefore, God refers to his people by name, mentioning their lifespan and descendants. The next time you feel overwhelmed in a vast crowd, remember that the focus of God's attention and love is on the individual and on you. Verses 3 through 5. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. All human beings are related, going back to Adam and Eve. Mankind is a family that shares one flesh and blood. Remember this when prejudice enters your mind or hatred invades your feelings. Each person is valuable and unique creation of God. And verse 25 through 27. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech, and after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years, and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. How did people live so long? Some believe that the ages listed here were lengths of family dynasties rather than ages of individual men. Those who think these were actual ages offer three explanations. Number one, the human race was more genetically pure in this early time period, so there was less disease to shorten lifespans. Number two, no rain had yet fallen on the earth, and the expanse of water above that we read about in chapter 1, verse 7, kept out harmful cosmic rays and shielded people from environmental factors that hasten aging. And number three, God gave people longer lives so they would have time to fill the earth, like we read in chapter 1, verse 28. Now, to give a little bit of background on Abel, Abel was the second child born into the world, but the first one to obey God. All we know about this man is that his parents were Adam and Eve. He was a shepherd. He presented pleasing sacrifices to God, and his short life was ended at the hands of a jealous brother, Cain. The Bible doesn't tell us why God liked Abel's gift and disliked Cain's, but both Cain and Abel knew what God expected. Only Abel obeyed. Throughout history, Abel is remembered for his obedience and faith. Read about that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4. And he is called righteous in Matthew chapter 23, verse 35. The Bible is filled with God's general guidelines and expectations for our lives. It is also filled with more specific directions. Like Abel, we must obey regardless of the cost and trust God to make things right. Strengths and accomplishments. He was the first member of the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11. He was the first shepherd and the first martyr for truth. And we read about that in Matthew chapter 23, verse 35. Lessons from his life. God hears those who come to him. God recognizes the innocent person and sooner or later punishes the guilty. Vital statistics. Where this took place, just outside of Eden. Occupation, shepherd. Relatives, his parents was Adam and Eve. His brother was Cain. Key verse. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks, even though he is dead. And we read this in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4. Abel's story is told in Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 8. He is also mentioned in Matthew chapter 23, verse 35, Luke chapter 11, verse 51, and Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4, and Hebrews chapter 12, verse 24. Again, brothers and sisters, I just wanted to do a quick little reading on Genesis chapter 5, and it just broke down Adam's descendants from Adam to Noah. I love you, brothers and sisters. Have a good night.